How far we've come from the Jacobson decision of 1992. This is I.C.A.C. Unpacked for the fourth day of October 2024. Boy, the Jacobson decision of 30 years ago, 1992, was really quite a hallmark because it impacted on sex abuses cases, it impacted on entrapment globally, as well as a legal definition. And it also impacted on other issues such as privacy and First Amendment. In other words, how much privacy do you have online? How much First Amendment do you have, even if you say that, sex between children and adults is probably overhyped or even okay? And that's interesting because today we're in this incredible war on sex where the public has been over sexualized, if you will, and pressed to believe that there's a predator on every corner and behind every tree and in every bush. And while certainly we need to get a handle on the degree to which sexual predation is as rampant as the police and the government tell us, what we don't want to do is hyper sexualize it by allowing police to go ahead and be on adult dating sites and social media sites and in other ways ginning up statistics. If we didn't have that, I wonder what the situation would really look like. Probably it would still be very significant. But for some reason, the other side does not want us to be engaged at all in restricting proactive sex things. And what we suspect is the reason is because those sex stings allow the government to make it look like they're very, very vocal and very aggressive, and that they are really cracking down on this. And all they're really doing is destroying lives here by adding to the statistics they already have. Furthermore, we've already discussed where they are abusing terms like abuse, like sex trafficking, and every time they grab somebody, they call it grooming. They accuse me of grooming when there was no grooming talk. They accuse people of sex trafficking where they didn't actually traffic anybody. And to make it matters more complicated and to make the issue more convoluted as to what is the extent of the child exploitation? Where is it? What are we looking at? What does it really look like? Well, we have people like Tim Ballard and the O.U.R. folks in league with I.C.A.C, which I'm going to talk about at some point. It's a huge, huge thing that I'm trying to get my head around right now, as well as looking at the funding matrices that I.C.A.C gets versus what they actually report out as their figures, which is versus what actually the figures are. Because of course their number one goal they claim is to um, rescue real live children. And of course, they get around this when you claim that they haven't done this by saying, well, if we hadn't shown up, there would have been a problem. But of course, we know that that's not true. With cases such as mine, it's not true. And many other cases, if they had left well enough alone, if they had bothered to look at other options, instead of being so adamant about trying to create a crime, then they would have found the truth. But it's clear that that's not exactly what they're looking for. And all this impacts on a 30-year-old decision in the United States Supreme Court, U.S. v. Jacobson of 1992, in which a fairly conservative court, the old style conservatives like Justice O'Connor and even Justice Scalia and Justice David Souter, and really were in league with some of the liberals on the court to find overwhelmingly that Jacob's privacy rights and his First Amendment rights were violated because he said, I think that this is overhyped. I think that the issue of child exploitation is much smaller than they're making it out to be. And simply looking at nude photos of young men and boys is not illegal. And in fact, it had not been illegal up until a couple of years before the police entrapped him. And I'll get to his case in a minute because it does, in a very real way, impact on some of the issues a lot of the issues that we're talking about here. But I want to talk about some of the stories that have. I get a lot of emails. I can't get to all of them. I received a message last night as well from somebody whose family is being attacked and harassed because of a erroneous modern Supreme Court, which said that being on the sex offender registry is no worse than signing up for a Price Club membership. That's the famous John Roberts, who's happy to bend the rules and the law in whichever direction he would like to interpret it, as long as the right people are affected and the wrong people are punished. Um, so I want to read you some of these cases here that impact on what we've been talking about, what I.C.A.C does, and I'll finish with the Jacobson decision. So, in some of these cases where you have people on adult websites, they are being set up repeatedly. We've said that. By the way, we have people like John in VA, who I finally had to block, who I have discovered his identity with a better than 90% accuracy. He is a government agent, as I suggested all along. And when I say an agent, I mean he works for the government in a high position. I will not do him the disrespect of revealing his identity here, even though he had no problem going after me and saying that because I was a criminal in his eyes and in the eyes of a false conviction, therefore it's okay that I'm out there, but he certainly shouldn't take on any risk at all, which is very, very convenient. So this is entitled Email I was sent the FBI's failures in child abuse cases. And of course, in my case, this person references that they did contact me. Law enforcement contacted me. I did not contact them. I did not show any indication of interest in sex with children. I said that over and over again. And that should have been the end of it. That should have been the end of it. They should have simply desisted. Somebody else contacted me today and said, well, but you sent them a picture of your thang. I'm exaggerating what they wrote. THANG is what they said. And I said, no, I didn't really do that. I didn't knowingly send to a minor a picture of that kind of thing. No, I didn't. And that's what they have to argue. They have to argue that I willingly knew that. Did they prove that in court? No, they just said it. And that was good enough for the judge. In fact, we pushed back on that severely because they didn't demonstrate that I had known that that account was a minor account. And we had said the account had been deactivated, so how could it have received something? But of course, the judge didn't care about that. So again, memory is hindsight is 2020 in some respects, but as the memory as a distance fades away, my memory fades too, and I have to refer to my notes more and more, particularly as I'm working on my book. But they did not prove predisposition, which was a central issue in the Jacobson case, too. They didn't prove that he had any propensity. When they went into his house, they didn't find anything, just like in my house and in my car. But again, to the trolls, to John and VA, to the cops, you went to meet the person, that's predisposition as far as they're concerned. Okay. Never mind that I have a history of dealing with kids and helping them through difficult situations, including suicide ideations, death of a parent. There's several of those. Other kinds of issues, LGBTQ issues, where the parents are putting pressure on them. So for me, it was natural to try to reach out and help someone. But that didn't matter to the court, and it didn't matter to the prosecution as well. It certainly didn't matter to Detective Bauer. So there was that issue too about we never contact them. Police say we wait for them to contact us, and of course that's not true. In Sean's case in Texas, I'm reading here from the email. They created an adult sex chat room on Kick and added Sean and other men to their chat. The police did this. Then they lied on the police report by stating that Sean joined a teen chat room. He did not even join the chat himself. They added him and a bunch of other men to the chat. And I'm on WhatsApp and they add me. I get on crypto groups that I never requested, and I have to block them and take them off. So police have the ability to do this as well. It was clearly not a teen chat room. It was clearly about a female seeking an adult man to meet for casual sex. Of course, the police were not going to put that in their police report when they created an adult chat room with a name that was something like After Dark, and they added Sean to it. And again, contrary to their famous lines, we do not contact them, we let them contact us. They did, in fact, contact Sean first to invite him to join their sex chat. That's from one email, okay? The poster here references that police never talk about young teens using the site and how concerned they are. Very little of that. They do a bit, but very little. They talk about child sex trafficking or predators who lure and groom children online because that's scary. They have worked the public into a frenzy and had the public believe that anytime there's something going on, that must be something suspicious. Every time there's an interaction, the public now feels inclined to call up the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, and immediately put a report in. And so of the 250,000 reports they get annually, just a few hundred end up being anything at all that the police readily investigate. So that's quite a lot out there. And of course, they should turn their attention to themselves, the police, because of their violations of children, which are far more egregious than anybody they get on an adult dating site. Not to mention the vigilantes and the self-styled prophets of sorts like Tim Ballard and stuff. They're far worse than anything that's done online because they actually have the motive and the predisposition and the cover of government as well as the public as if they're good guys. I mean, I would like to have a movie of myself out there, I guess, telling what they actually did and showing all the evidence. Of course, I've invited people to see the evidence, but not in the courtroom, not in the courthouse. They can sit in the library with me, etc., and look it over. I'm happy to discuss with them, but I'm not going to load it online, as I said, because again and again, trolls take it. They slice it and dice it. They misrepresent it. They pick and choose bits of it, such as the troll who was following Arizona predator prevention, who asked me what age I thought was the appropriate age to have sex. And I said, well, around the world it's between 14 and 16. And that became me advertising that this is what I wanted for the world. Instead of me saying, well, your quarrel is not with me, it's with all the other governments who have made that determination. What did they do to arrive at that determination? In the United States, it's 16. Okay. And so that became, oh, you're attracted to 16-year-olds. You know, again, you can't win with these people if you're honest with it. And the same thing with the police. Until more people step forward and fight back, they're going to continue to get away with this. They're going to continue to go not where they know it is. Okay. And John and VA put out this long list before I blocked him of all the places where the police have gone on the deep and dark web, which only a government agent would likely know that because he had a very thorough list. And he said, you say they never go on the deep and dark web. No, I say they should go more often there because that's where the problem is, according to them. Okay, it's not the average person on an adult website looking for a hookup. That's not where the big problems are. But yet they're going on there and they're getting some people, no doubt. They're saving some people, no doubt. But they're entrapping a lot of people who had no interest in having sex with minors, who never expressed the tiniest bit of interest in it. And that's the point. That's the point. Okay? Why are they doing that? Why? Well, you might ask them why. They claim that this is a huge thing, but they don't have statistics to really back it up. And in fact, we have statistics that demonstrate how much damage they do. So, let's see what else we have here. I have another one here. Yes. Let's see. Yeah, somebody says yes. The FBI and others go after low-hanging fruit on adult dating sites. I mentioned this as well. I actually baited somebody who was in a grocery store, who was a public information officer for the police, and she used low-hanging fruit. She said the reason they go on these adult dating platforms is it's easier. It's just easier. Well, what happens is when you engage in non-court monitored, non-public monitored baiting and switching on these sites, you're going to inevitably capture people who had no interest in children. And they don't care that these people are damaged by the police. And that's the issue. So we have another person, I'm just name him John, and he says, yep, they do this. That was my case in '07. Casual encounters chat room on Yahoo. Totally intoxicated. I was totally intoxicated, John says. Two conversations and one nude picture later, and my life was ruined. Now, again, some people would say, well, it should be ruined. But what right does the government have to be playing on these sites? So what? You sent a nude picture. You didn't necessarily send it to a child. Now, you might say, well, that's not what I would do. That's not my judgment. Okay, fine. But in the digital age, the rules are changing so quickly. Things are changing so rapidly. And we have no laws to protect us. What about deep fakes? All right, this is a very dangerous era that we're entering. And the police are happy to play in that sandbox until such time, as they always are, until such time as the courts or the public say enough. Enough is enough. Here are your parameters. Here are your guardrails. Here are the rules of engagement. And then you're going to see that you really get the truth coming out. And the truth is going to be very ugly. So, continuing with John, I never spoke to them again. 8 months later, I had moved to Alaska with my family, cleaned up my life, and was taking care of my family. And the police came all the way up here to haul me back to Michigan, confiscated all of our electronics looking for child porn, and found nothing. I.C.A.C even put out a press release saying the cold mountains of Alaska couldn't hide this person from the long arm of Michigan law. After 8 months, I'm quoting them, after 8 months of jail, they offered me 5 years probation and 25 years on the registry. I had no money to fight it. This is what they do. They weaponize the system to grind you down, claiming because they have the press releases, they have the public behind them, they have all the resources to make you look bad in front of the public. And the public never asks, what's the other side of this story? No money to fight it and got no help from a public defender. When you're jail when you're in jail for it and being threatened and assaulted, you take any deal you can take to get out faster. It's all about numbers, keeping up the registry numbers and the conviction rates as well. They will do anything and everything to keep the numbers up. They have the press, the judges, the prosecutor, lawyers, and the sick, a lot of words, that project their fantasies onto people running these sting operations. That's the other thing, projection. They come up with the idea, they come up with the fantasies, they come up with this idea of sex. They push it on you and they implant it just as they did on Jacobson. But again, 30 years ago, they didn't get away with it. They're getting away with it routinely now. There's no way to even get a fair trial without an untainted jury. Certainly, if you put a press release out there and everybody can see it, I mean, you have Donald Trump screaming around there that he is getting tainted juries, but then, of course, he won't shut his mouth and tells everybody about what he did and how he's actually innocent. So he's helping to taint the jury. And still, you can see it's being pressed out, one of his cases now to 2026 in all likelihood, according to legal analysts. Money flowing, continuing to quote here, money flowing at full force 24/7. Okay. Yeah. The rest of it's about YouTube videos and stuff like that. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. I'm just reading through it here. I have a lot of them. You have to excuse me. So that's a couple more that I've read. I've told stories at length of other people on there, and I'll tell some more. But I want to finish today with the Jacobson decision of 1992, and I'm going to read you just a little bit of the summary here, so you can see what the court, a court that really thought and balanced the Constitution with privacy rights and with what government agents are allowed to do. At a time when federal law permitted such conduct, Petitioner Jacobson ordered and received from my bookstore two Bare Boys magazines containing photographs of nude preteen and teenage boys. It was allowed back then, and it was indeed allowed through, I think, the early 1990s here. From like the 60s or 70s based on my research. Subsequently, the Child Protection Act of 1984 made illegal the receipt through the mail of sexually explicit depictions of children. Of course, that's another thing. What's sexually explicit depictions? They've tried in Virginia repeatedly to pass a law to make it so wide, that definition, that you could drive a Mack truck through it, that it would include, in fact, a grandmother who has a picture up on the mantle of two of her infant grandchildren in a bathtub. That would fall under this definition. I've been told repeatedly by police, oh no, we'd never do that. But we have evidence that they actually have in other places. So there's no reason to believe that they wouldn't. They do it on Romeo and Juliet cases where they wait until the young man is 18 and then they prosecute him for child sexual predation because he had a 17 or a 16-year-old girlfriend at the time who's now 17 or 18. And they call that child pornography when we used to just call it dating. It's a travesty what they're getting away with. So, again, after finding Jacobson's name on the bookstore mailing list, which it had been on for over 20 years, by the way, two government agencies sent mail to him through five fictitious organizations and a bogus pen pal to explore his willingness to break the law. Fishing expeditions, just like they do on the adult dating sites. They get no tip or anything. They just come after you. Many of those organizations. Oh, by the way, John in VA tells me that they wouldn't go after you if you didn't show some predisposition, which is hilarious. Shows he's completely ignorant of what the police actually do. They randomly target. Many of those organizations represented that they were founded to protect and promote sexual freedom and freedom of choice, and that they promoted lobbying efforts through catalog sales. So about sexual freedom. Some mailings raised the specter of censorship. Well, John Jacobson was interested in this, in censorship, and felt that he should be allowed to see non-sexualized images of this. So Jacobson, and it wasn't illegal at the time, remember, Jacobson responded to some of the correspondence. After 21 or 22 years on the government's mailing list, Jacobson was solicited finally to order child pornography. So he'd been on this list for a long time, and they finally sent him a solicitation for child pornography. Remember, he didn't ask for it, they sent it to him. He answered a letter that described concern about child pornography, and he said it was, quote, hysterical nonsense, and he decried international censorship. So it appears he didn't believe that it was so, to the extent that it was, or to the extent that the government was representing it. Reading further, unquote, and then received a catalog and ordered a magazine depicting young boys engaged in sexual activities. He was arrested after a controlled delivery of a photocopy of the magazine, but a search of his house revealed no materials other than those sent by the government and the Bear Boys magazine. So here he actually ordered it. It came to his house and they arrested him after they had badgered him a number of times. So reading further, this is what he expected he would find. At his jury trial, he pleaded entrapment and testified he had been curious to know the type of sexual actions to which the last letter referred. Can you believe that? So some of us haven't even gone that far. We've gone nowhere near that. never said anything. In fact, said the opposite of our interest in sexual activity with children. Said we weren't interested. We we said repeatedly. I said I think 22 times that I wasn't interested in that. It didn't matter to them today. And that Jacobson said he had been shocked by the Bare Bones magazine because, quote, he had not expected to receive photographs of minors engaged in sex, just the nudes. He was convicted, and the Court of Appeals affirmed the conviction. And he appealed to the Supreme Court. And this is what the Supreme Court held. The Supreme Court said the prosecution failed as a matter of law to adduce evidence to support the jury verdict that Jacobson was predisposed, independent of the government's actions and beyond. In other words, if the government hadn't been there, was he showing any interest in sex with children? And the answer is no. Today, they say the very fact that the government creates the circumstances, has you involved in that, pushes and badgers and takes advantage of every little conversation, twists things around, gets you engaged in that, and then says, "Oh, look, you had a predisposition because you finally went in any affirmative action toward our goal that we set up, and you must obviously be a child predator." Okay, let's see. Jacobson was not predisposed, independent of the government's acts and beyond a reasonable doubt, to violate the law by receiving child pornography through the mails. Nowadays, they say there's reasonable doubt if the police said so. And don't think I'm exaggerating at all. We have the Ryan Pitt case where they couldn't produce any evidence that he had actually done what they claimed, but they claimed that they had a video and they couldn't find the video. It was 15 seconds. So the nice police officer described what was in the video. And that was good enough for the judge. That was totally good enough for the judge. They were happy that that was just fine. That was evidence. And of course, what is your protection against a dishonest police officer? When we walked out of the court in the Pick case, the dishonest forensic guy and the dishonest police officer high-fived each other on their way out of the courtroom. They hadn't even cleared the courtroom when they were high-fiving each other and congratulating each other on their deception. It was disgusting and despicable to watch. And the man is ending a 7-year run in jail in prison for nothing at all. In their zeal to enforce the law, reading again Jacobson's decision held by the Supreme Court, government agents may not originate a criminal design, implant in an innocent person's mind the predisposition to commit a criminal act, and then induce commission of the crime so that the government may prosecute. That's exactly what they did. They cite Soros v. United States, a 1932 decision, which John MVA said does not apply here. I don't know why. I guess because it was a prohibition issue and he couldn't see beyond that. Jacobson was not simply offered the opportunity to order pornography, after which he promptly availed himself of that opportunity. He was the target of 26 months of repeated government mailings and communications, end quote. So the government, just like I.C.A.C police officers, continue to badger, cajole, come after you, set the stage. They, in my case, impersonated Zach, who's a real subscriber. They took advantage of my conversation with Zach to pretend like it was a conversation with Alex. And they were able to leverage that in a case against me by claiming also that when I had the underage account blocked, they created a new one named Alex, very common name, ignored the fact that I was communicating with other Alexes, which we're able to demonstrate, and simply had me had it appear like I knew all along that the two were the case. I did figure it out eventually, and when I figured it out eventually, with no sex in between, they said, "Aha, see, you knew all along." When in fact I'd only discovered a portion of their deception to try to make it appear that I had known all along. Again, no sex talk, no pictures knowingly exchanged. and none of that mattered to the court. How far we've come from Jacobson, how far we've come. And they're doing it over and over again. And it won't stop, as we've learned over and over again from the physical cases, the George Floyd and the Tyree Edwards, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, and the many, many other cases, okay? We've seen police will get away with it if they can. So if you're seeing over time what they're getting away physically, that you're seeing over and over on the news, what do you suppose they're getting away digitally online where nobody's watching? What do you suppose they're getting away with there? Think about that for a while. Because I have a number of other questions. I think I'll wait for another video that I will put up there. But think about that and join the fight. Please subscribe. Please, like the video. It helps getting the message out there. I know this one's a little long. I'm trying to make them shorter, but the information's so vast and it's hard to keep up with it all. So thank you very much for subscribing on the 4th of October, 2024. Please like it as well. I appreciate it. This is Norman Michael Ation for I.C.A.C. Unpacked. Have a good day.